states that a set of principles, a model, or a theory of adult learning have and continue to be pursued by adult educators. However, there is currently no single theory of adult learning. What we do have are a number of frameworks or models, each of which contribute something to our understanding of adults as learners. The best known of these efforts is Andragogy, which is a concept that was popularized by Knowles. This video will provide an overview of Knowles' perspective of Andragogy. During this video, please reflect on the following analysis questions. Where did the notion of Andragogy emerge from? What distinguishes adults' learning from children's learning? What are Knowles' 6 assumptions of Andragogy? And how do the 6 assumptions apply to adult learning? The term Andragogy was first coined in 1833 by a German teacher named Alexander Kapp. He used the term to describe the educational practice that Greek philosopher Plato used when instructing his pupils who were young adults. In 1921, German social scientist Eugen Rogenstock, teaching in the Academy of Labor in Frankfurt, was assigned the task of shaping the methods of workers' education. He insisted that adult education required special teachers, methods, and philosophy, and he used the term andragogy to refer to these special requirements. Around the same time, Edward Lindman, an American philosopher and educator, traveled to Germany and became quite acquainted with the workers' education movement. He was the first to bring the concept of andragogy to America, and published a book titled The Meaning of Adult Education in 1926, which led to a really large mainstream discussion of adult learning. In 1927, Anderson and Lindman also introduced the term andragogy in their book titled Education Through Experience. The notion of andragogy gained popularity in the late 1960s and early 1970s through the work of Malcolm Knowles, who was an American adult educator. Knowles defined andragogy as the art and science of helping adults learn, as opposed to pedagogy, which is the art and science of helping children learn. In 1968, Knowles published his first article about the understanding of andragogy with the provocative title, Andragogy, Not Pedagogy. In 1970, Knowles published a book entitled The Modern Practice of Adult Education, Andragogy versus Pedagogy, in which he argued that pedagogy, an approach to childhood learning, is inappropriate for adults and should be restricted to the use with children. His view was based on 4 assumptions about self-concept, the role of experience, readiness to learn, and orientation of learning. In a short time, the term andragogy received recognition and acceptance by the adult education field within North America and other English-speaking countries. During the 1970s, andragogy came under close scrutiny, and critics started to question whether there could be a clear distinction between children's learning and adults' learning. Knowles responded by changing the subtitle of The Modern Practice of Adult Education from Andragogy versus Pedagogy in the 1970 edition to From Andragogy to Pedagogy in the 1980 edition. We'll explore further the andragogy versus pedagogy debate in video clip 3.3. Knowles explains andragogy as a set of assumptions about adults as learners and a series of recommendations for planning, management, and evaluation of adult learning. According to Knowles, andragogy is simply another model of assumptions about adult learners to be used alongside the pedagogical model of assumptions, thereby providing 2 alternative models for testing out the assumption as to their fit with particular situations. Furthermore, the models are probably most useful when seen not as dichotomous, but rather as 2 ends of a spectrum, with a realistic assumption in a given situation falling in between the 2 ends. Over the years, Knowles has clarified, expanded, and modified his ideas about andragogy. Most recently, he has described 6 assumptions underlying the concept of andragogy. These assumptions, when combined with the principles related to the learning process, can offer the adult educator an understanding of the interrelationship between adulthood and learning. The first assumption is the need to know. Knowles recognized the need that adults have to know why it's important to learn information before they begin learning it, and especially how it will apply to their everyday situation and lives. Knowles suggested that the need to know incorporates 3 dimensions: how learning will be conducted, what learning will be conducted, and why learning is important. Assumption number 2 is the learner's self-concept. According to Knowles, with maturity and age, an individual's self-concept becomes less dependent and more self-directed. Adults have a self-concept of being responsible for their own decisions and their own lives. Once they have arrived at that self-concept, they develop a deep psychological need to be seen and treated by others as capable of self-direction, and they often resist attempts to limit their ability to be self-directed. When self-directed, learners take the initiative in diagnosing their learning needs, formulating goals, identifying resources, choosing and implementing learning strategies, and evaluating learning outcomes. Knowles acknowledged that in some circumstances, adults can be more independent and self-directed than others, and some adults may need assistance in becoming more self-directed. Assumption number 3 is the role of the learner's experience. Knowles acknowledged that adults tend to come into education with a vast amount of prior experiences compared to that of children. An instruction that builds upon the experience of adults tends to be more successful. According to Knowles, the richest resource for learning resides within adult learners themselves. The difference in experience between children and adults has at least 3 consequences for learning. Adults have more to contribute to the learning of others, adults have a richer foundation of experience to which they can relate new experiences, and adults have acquired a larger number of fixed habits and patterns of thought. Knowles recognized that individual experience could also negatively affect learning through preconceived notions about reality and habitual ways of thinking and acting, and prejudices that have developed through life experiences. Assumption number 4 is the readiness to learn. Knowles proposed that adult learners become ready to learn when they experience a need to know something that connects to their life situations. He based this assumption about learner readiness on his observation that adults often experience situations that trigger a need to learn something new. Specific events that force change in one's life, such as a birth, death, marriage, divorce, or loss of a job, often prompt the need for new knowledge and cause adults to seek out learning opportunities. Assumption number 5 is orientation to learning. Knowles also found that as people mature, there is a change in time perspective from future application of knowledge to immediacy of application. Thus, adults tend to be more problem-centered than subject-centered in their orientation to learning. They engage in learning largely in a response to pressures they feel from their current life situation, and are motivated to learn to the extent that they perceive the learning will help them perform a task or solve a problem that they may be facing in real life. Furthermore, they learn new knowledge, understanding, skills, values, and attitudes more effectively when they're presented in a context of application to real-life situations. Assumption number 6 is the adult learner's motivation. Knowles assumed that adults are more motivated to learn by internal factors rather than external ones. According to Knowles, while adults are responsive to some external motivators such as better jobs, promotion, higher salaries, etc., the most powerful motivators are internal pressures such as the desire for enhanced self-esteem, recognition, better quality of life, improved self-confidence, personal fulfillment, and achieved self-actualization. The following table provides a summary of the differences between andragogy and pedagogy. In terms of need to know, from an andragogical perspective, the learner needs to know why something is important prior to learning it. From a pedagogical perspective, the learner needs to know what the teacher tells them. In terms of self-concept, from an andragogical perspective, the learner is responsible for their own decisions, whereas in the pedagogical perspective, the learner has a dependent personality. With regards to experience, in an andragogical model, the learner experience has great importance, whereas through a pedagogical view, the learner's experience is of little worth. In terms of readiness to learn, within andragogy, the learner becomes ready to learn when they see content as relevant to their lives. Whereas in pedagogy, the learner becomes ready to learn what the teacher requires. With regard to orientation to learning, from an andragogical perspective, the learner expects life or problem-centered content, whereas the pedagogical perspective expects subject-centered content. And finally, with regard to motivation, from an andragogical perspective, the learner is motivated primarily by internal forces, whereas with pedagogy, the learner is motivated primarily by external forces. From each of the 6 assumptions, Knowles drew numerous implications for the design, implementation, and evaluation of learning activities with adults. The next video will explore Knowles' assumptions in practice. Please reflect on the following synthesis questions. Do you think adults learn differently from children? In what ways do Knowles' 6 assumptions of andragogy explain adult learning? Do you agree with the 6 assumptions? And is there any assumptions that you would add or modify? And how does the andragogical model fit with your own learning style as an adult?